The sound of the doorbell echoed through my empty house like a banshee's wail. It was Halloween night, and I was alone. Not by choice, but because it was my ex's turn to take our kids, Lily and Ben, trick-or-treating. The custody agreement was part of the divorce proceedings. Though I found it hard, I was getting used to the echoing silence of our once lively home. When the doorbell rang, I was hoping to see Lily and Ben at the door, their faces lit up with joy and their bags heavy with candy. Instead, I found an empty porch. Puzzled, I closed the door, thinking it was some kids playing a prank. The doorbell rang again. Rushing to answer it, expecting to see my children, I found nothing. Just the chilling October wind that seemed to whisper their names. This repeated throughout the night, the doorbell ringing, and each time, there was no one there. By midnight, I was frustrated, frightened, and worried about my children. Their mother hadn't called, and they hadn't come by like they were supposed to. The worry nibbled at my sanity, and every ring of the doorbell twisted the knife of dread in my gut. The next day, the town was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The local news reported multiple cases of missing children from the night before. My heart skipped several beats as the newscaster read the names of the missing, but to my relief, Lily and Ben weren't among them. Still, the relief was fleeting. I tried calling my ex and the kids, but was met with voicemail each time. Panic gnawed at my insides, leaving me a hollow husk of a man. My heart skipped several beats as the newscaster read the names of the missing, but to my relief, Lily and Ben weren't among them. Still, the relief was fleeting. I tried calling my ex and the kids, but was met with voicemail each time. Panic gnawed at my insides, leaving me a hollow husk of a man. I decided to drive over to my ex's place, desperate to know where our children were. When I arrived, the house was eerily silent. There were no sounds of laughter, no television noise, no signs of life. The windows were dark, the front lawn strewn with Halloween decorations. I banged on the door, praying for an answer, but none came. I called out for my children, but my voice was swallowed up by the ominous silence. A chilling realization started to creep up on me. Something was terribly wrong. I broke down the door, and what I found inside froze the blood in my veins. The house was empty, eerily quiet, and there was a coldness to it that seemed to seep into my bones. My ex was nowhere to be found. The kids' rooms were untouched, their beds unslept in. It was as if they disappeared into thin air. Suddenly, I remembered the doorbell, the incessant ringing from the night before. A feeling of dread settled over me. Were my kids trying to reach me? Why couldn't I see them? Why were they now missing? The questions swirled in my head, intertwining with the fear and the crippling uncertainty. The silence of the house echoed the silence in my life without my children, and it was the most horrific thing I'd ever experienced. With trembling hands, I dialed the police, reporting my children and their mother missing. As I sat in the empty house, the dim light from the setting sun casting long, menacing shadows, the doorbell rang again. But this time, I was terrified to answer. My life had taken a horrifying turn. The doorbell, once a symbol of my children's happiness and innocence, had now turned into a monstrous, chilling sound that echoed the emptiness and terror of my life. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Lily, Ben, or their mother. The police were at a loss. They'd searched the house, the surrounding areas, spoken to neighbors, but all leads hit a dead end. Every night, I returned to my empty home, the silence deafening, the doorbell haunting me. The sound echoed in my dreams, morphing into a nightmarish symphony that jolted me awake in the early hours of the morning. The townsfolk began whispering, pointing fingers. The words suspect and guilty started floating around. I was becoming a pariah in my own town. The missing children had created an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, and my own loss made me a prime target for their angst. But the real horror was inside me. The fear of not knowing where my children were was eating me alive, turning me into a hollow shell. Every knock, every ring made me jump, my heart in chest as if ready to burst. One night, while sitting in the dark, the doorbell rang. It was late, well past midnight, and unexpectedness of the sound sent shivers down my spine. I approached the door, the dread heavy in my stomach. As I reached out for the doorknob, I felt an inexplicable chill. I opened the door, expecting the usual emptiness, but instead I found a small plastic bag on the doorstep. Inside the bag were two things: a small, worn-out teddy bear that belonged to Lily, and a superhero mask. Seeing their precious belongings, my heart sank. Tears stung my eyes as I clutched the items close, feeling a part of my soul shatter. The silence of the night seemed to mock my despair. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was living a parent's worst nightmare. The doorbell continued to ring throughout the night. The following day, the police visited me. They'd found my ex's car abandoned on a rural road. There was no sign of her or the children, and no clues to their whereabouts. The disappearance of my children, the unexplained doorbell, the whispers of the town, and the unbearable silence in my home. It was all a living nightmare. The worst part was the guilt, the gnawing thought that if only I had been there that Halloween night, my children might still be with me. I clung to the teddy bear and mask, the last remnants of my children. The objects seemed to radiate their absence, their laughter, their joy, their innocence. They were cruel reminders of the reality I was living. Every time the doorbell rang, I'd rush to answer, hoping against hope that I'd find Lily and Ben standing there. But all I ever found was an empty porch and the cold, uncaring wind. The terror wasn't in monsters, ghosts, or ghouls.